Well, hello everyone. I'm Eunice Simmons, I'm Vice-Chancellor here at the University of Chester. And my talk explores the question of whether university brings the same benefits to all students. Is the graduate advantage of equal value to everyone? So in considering this, a very useful term is social mobility. This can be described as moving up into higher social class, income level, or occupation type. And there's a useful report I've referenced here by the Institute for Fiscal Studies with the Sutton Trust and the Department for Education. It highlights that there are institutional factors at play. In other words, for graduates, the university you attend can make a difference, and less selective universities take on the majority of poorer students. And those poorer students do often have lower average graduate earnings. However, this report goes on to point out how well they do in the labour market, particularly when you take into account their prior school attainment. So this is obviously worthy of deeper examination, and I'm very pleased to introduce you to TEDxUoChester, which stands for Transforming Access and Student Outcomes in Higher Education. This is a fantastic charity based in Westminster. It's one of the government What Works centres using evidence to make policy. It's funded by the Office for Students, and I'm honoured to be chair of its trustees. TEDxUoChester undertakes and commissions research into the whole student journey, with a particular focus on students who come from less advantaged backgrounds. This excellent rapid review here is a great example of the outputs. And this report, The Value of Higher Education, is the graduate advantage the same for everyone, confirms that yes, higher education is linked to economic advantage for disadvantaged students, but it confirms that those same students earn less than graduates from advantaged backgrounds, even when we take into account that institutional factor, the university, and also take into account the subject choice. So, looking into this in more detail, a particular measure of disadvantage is those who've had free school meals when they were 16. This cohort, as you can see on the right, earns 8,000 more than disadvantaged non-graduates, people who didn't go to university, and almost 5,000 more than non-disadvantaged non-graduates. But there is an earnings gap. They earn 4,000 less than graduates from more advantaged backgrounds, even taking into account university, subject choice, etc. So, which particular individual characteristics appear to be important? So talk about the institution, then the subject, but what about the students taking that subject? Socioeconomic background is absolutely key, but so is ethnicity, for example, gender most definitely, and that important school attainment level keeps coming back into the frame. And the circles on the screen there often overlap, or as we say, they intersect. So a student can have more than one of these characteristics. And that in itself may restrict opportunities. For example, disadvantaged students are less likely to travel to work, so they may not move themselves from their current location to one where they can earn a higher salary. Now, at our university, we're not happy just to discuss this as a theoretical concept. We want to do something about it, as do many of the universities working with TEDxUoChester across the UK. One very useful framing we use here is the idea of capitals of different kinds. This is a long-standing idea that many years ago was elaborated on by the famous French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu. Here I'm using it, though, in terms of an individual. You can also use capitals to talk about the economy of a state or a nation, for example, or a society. But thinking back to that individual, you'll all be familiar with the idea of economic capital. This is how much money, property, or other assets an individual would have. And we use this as the usual sort of capital in everyday speech. But on the right-hand side is something called cultural capital. This can be influences from your background, the sophistication of your language level, for example. I don't mean just foreign languages, but how well you use your mother tongue. And whether you consume experiences which are deemed of value in your society. So in a Western society, you might, for example, go to art galleries or classical music concerts. That's consuming experiences that add into your social capital. And finally, and very importantly on that right-hand side, have you gained educational qualifications that will help you build other capitals? So you could draw a line from the right-hand side to the left-hand side of that slide. And by bringing your level of education qualifications higher, you can actually influence your economic capital. But the one I want to draw your attention to today is the one in the middle. This is social capital. And this focuses on very straightforward and easy to understand and easy to influence aspects of your life as a student. The first of which is networks. These networks in social science are described as being mutually beneficial. That means you respect the other people in your network, and crucially, they respect you. In turn, they can bring resources both to you and those around you. Here at Chester, we've got a citizen-student strategy which aims to open doors for students and develop just these capacities around networks, and other universities working with TESO are attempting to do very much the same. So we take the student journey from applicant to graduate. We focus then in on 4 themes listed here. The first are the networks. These are really, really crucial. Then confidence, exposure to other cultures and global challenges, and finally, we aim to support the link of academic learning into the real world to ensure that the students can progress into a well-researched, well-practiced, and successful future. This is called building social capital. So, as an audience then, how confident are you about these themes? Think about the first section here on the slide. This is knowledge-based. Do you know how to form positive working relationships? Do you know how to build and manage your connections and networks? Do you ever even think about them as something which you can actively build? Crucially, do you also know how to maintain them if you move, for example, from being a student to a graduate? And then on understanding, do you have a deep understanding of the value of these connections? Are you skilled? Are you skilled and confident at the actions needed to strengthen them? By navigating your professional settings, for example, in team meetings with others or at events. And finally, very importantly nowadays, are you equally effective online and in person? Now, what this doesn't mean is that everyone needs the same approach and characteristics, but whether you are loud and extrovert or quiet and introvert, this knowledge and these skills will definitely enhance your prospects. Universities also need to take a strategic approach to employability support. They need to work really closely with employers. They need to encourage them to pay their interns, for example, and also looking carefully at programs and how they embed employability. A few years ago, as part of some research, reviewing the outcomes of over 30,000 students across lots of different courses and subjects, what stood out was the transformative impact of work placements, whether they were long sandwich placements or shorter experiences in the workplace. And curriculum reviews should really take account of this. We work, for example, with lots of regional organisations, as do other universities, some 700 at the last count. They can be part of workplace experience. They can also come onto campus. They can allow you to shadow people in the workplace and really focus on things like Get a Graduate Job months. So even if you're not able to move far from home to take up the advantages, there should be plenty of graduate opportunities where you are. And I firmly believe you can build this social capital, particularly by joining something. Research also shows group membership actually creates social capital and has what's called a multiplier effect on those other forms of capital. You can improve your social position, but choose wisely, because don't forget that some groups have their own characteristics and cultures. Some may be open and inclusive, others may be closed and somewhat elitist, so choose very carefully. And it's not just at Chester where this work is going on. For many years, I've worked with former Secretary of State, Right Honourable Justine Greening. She's created the Purpose Coalition to work with employers across many sectors. And the secret here is to get those employers to look at their own staff base and whether they're too inclusive or exclusive and not inclusive enough in that regard. Law is a particular sector which has barriers to progression to those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. At the launch event for our law school, Justin spoke about the groundbreaking work she's doing with law to improve this, so with law practices across the country. We also work with Justin on our Levelling Up impact report, so please download it. It's an example of what students are doing to build their social capital and our university actions. Individually, students are becoming very successful. Just a few examples where students have gained national recognition in nursing, nutrition and law, to name but a few. We also know a lot of our research degree students come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and they're doing terrifically relevant research. There's an example here of TEDxUoChester. She was one of our race advocates, and she's researching the experience of black women in teaching. We also have terrific graduate job schemes, as do other universities. We're also getting a lot better through student shout-out and other channels at advertising all of these opportunities to you. And finally, you are all individuals within a large organisation, so how on earth do we target our efforts? So one of the things Taser has been looking at is how universities start to do this. Research has to be the way forward for knowledge-based institutions like universities. So here's a quick bit of research, the result of asking all our undergraduates when they return, either new or indeed returning students, whether they're confident or less confident across those 4 social capital themes. Students appear here to be most confident, learning about other cultures and challenges in society, great for them becoming global citizens. They appear slightly less confident in linking learning to the real world and in developing confidence and purposeful skills. But lastly and importantly, a sizable proportion of students here are not confident in developing networks and relationships, and that's where the university and the students need to work together. So, our programme to enhance social capital is absolutely vital. We've had a social capital steering group here at Chester for a few years. There's some credits up there, and we're now leading this through the Student Success Committee and others. But what we have done to help all, particularly new students coming in, is to develop resources and to collate and curate resources into a social capital collection, because there's a huge amount of wisdom and guidance out there on the internet. Internationally, this is an area of great interest. So I suggest that you start to use those resources. But finally, there's a call to action really for yourself, for each of you. This is about influencing and shaping the future. What I ask you to do as part of that is to consider your social capital and what aspects you might actually need to build. Look at resources that we've collated and elsewhere and consider how you can do this. And don't leave it too late. Please address it before you leave your university. It will entirely change your future. Thank you very much.